Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and this is How to Make a Survival Horror in Unity, and welcome to episode 4. So this episode we're going to combine things we've learned from the previous episodes to bring together something which will help the atmosphere and give us some experience with some coding. So that's going to be the main focus of this episode. We're going to do some coding this time. But before we do, we've got to set up a couple of things in our scene. So we're going to create like a torch holder on the wall which will have a flame, and that flame is going to animate via a particle system, but we're also going to have some lighting in there which are going to animate ourselves. So firstly, let's bring in the torch that we're going to use on the wall, and much in the same way as we did with the mushroom in the first episode, or second episode I think it was. If we go to objects and bring in this torch, so drag and drop the entire folder into the objects folder. And you can get this on the website. Head over there, download an assets, and you can download it from the survival horror page. So in the folder, we'll have a prefab, which is torch 1. Drag and drop that anywhere on our scene. And if we use our right mouse button, we can pan around and use the middle one to drag ourselves over here. So let's rotate this by 90 degrees on the Y. So let's change it to, I think we should be able to do 270. By default, it should be 180, but you just get the angle right to stick on your wall. So I'm going to drag it up here and drag it into position so as it sits on the wall quite nicely. Okay, that should do the trick. So what we'll do now is we will use a particle system again, but we'll use it in a different way that we previously did. So if we go on torch here, right click, and we can actually input effects and particle system directly on the torch, which is what we want to do. And what we want to do is make it go upwards, so we can rotate on the X by probably -90 it should be. There we go. So it doesn't look much like a flame at the moment, but we can do a couple of things to change this. So I won't go into too much detail about particle system again. If you feel like you need to go over some things, just head back an episode and you'll be able to see. So we want it looping, we want it pre-warmed because we want it to occur when the scene starts. We'll go with the start lifetime as 5, we'll keep that. Start speed will reduce to maybe 1. We'll see if that's alright later on. Start size we'll have a bit smaller, 0.5. Start colour we'll have it as an orange colour. So a bit more of a deeper orange, about there should do it. And we want play on awake. Yep, they should all do. Emission we'll have as, we'll keep it as 10. Now shape. How are we going to make this into a flame? Now we could change the shape as much as we want. We could change it to a circle, but it would go outwards. We could change it to a sphere, but it would just basically bring it same as a hemisphere. It works in a similar way. I think the best one to work with is still going to be cone, but if we reduce the angle to probably 0, so as it goes straight up, change the radius to 0.1 maybe. So now we can actually bring it into position just here. So hopefully we should be able to see it becoming a bit more flame-like, but there's still quite a bit more before we can actually make this look like a flame. So what we'll do is we will do size over lifetime as well. So if we tick size over lifetime and click on the grey box here, so we want it to start fairly high, so about there, but we want it to end rather small. So if we drag this point down, we don't need to add any more keys, but if we drag it down and bring it to about there, we should be able to see that yes, it is slowly becoming more like a flame now. I think what we'll also do is we'll add some rotation. So if we scroll down here and go to rotation over lifetime and click on the little icon there, you can change the angular velocity. Now this does have an impact to some degree on here. We won't notice it too much right now because we don't have a texture added to it, but I'm going to set it as 90. I feel like that's a pretty decent way to do it. I think what we may need to do is go back to start speed and shrink this a little more, maybe to 0.5. And in doing so, we may need to change the size of lifetime. So what you've got to remember is the size of the flame itself is going to be relative for the start speed and size over lifetime. So these two are related in a lot of ways. So we could actually have that all the way over there and change the start speed to 0.1. You can see that it does change, but it dissipates later on, early on, I should say, in that. So let's have our start speed as maybe 0.25. And I think we'll change the start size. We'll have that a little bit smaller. So we'll have 0.3. Okay, so I think 0.3 is going to be pretty decent. So although it looks okay now, let's have this looking more like a flame. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to go to our textures folder and import a flame texture. So drag and drop this fire texture into Unity. And you can drag and drop it onto the particle system itself, but this isn't all we have to do because we have to play around with a shader. So drag and drop onto particle system, and it'll look like this. This is where you can now see the rotation over the lifetime taking effect. You can see the texture itself rotating as it's ending. So what we need to do is we need to change the shader. So if we down here in the inspector panel where it's got shader, click, then click on particles, and then let's go to additive soft. And we can see that it does look a little bit more like a flame, but it looks a little bit funny. So we can play around with this a little bit more. So let's see what else we can do. Let's change the start lifetime to 2. You can see it shrinks, but if we change it to 8, it's quite high. I think 4 is probably a decent number. And if we untick rotation over lifetime, you can see, yeah, still not perfect. So the rotation over lifetime does need to actually be active, but I think we should probably have it. Maybe, let's experiment a little. Let's try it as 270. That's crazy. That's way too high. So let's have it as 35. That's not too bad. Start rotation. Let's have this as 45. No, too much. I think maybe 0. Start speed, start size. Maybe I do want to. You know, I think we will have start size a little bit bigger. I think it's just a case of playing around with these settings and getting this how you would want it to be. Size over lifetime. I think we do need to change that. So let's bring this down here. Let's bring this up. Or rather down, and let's add a point in the middle. So let's add a key in the middle. Okay, so that looks a little bit better there. You play around with these settings and you get looking exactly how you would like it. I'm not going to play around too much. It's all down to you how you'd want your flame to be, but you can play around so much with these settings to get the visualization you would want. What I might do is change some of these settings here. If we change the radius to 0.05, okay, I think that's a bit better. So I'm happy with how that looks for now. I'm just going to move on quickly. You can take your time, as I say. So what we need to do now is let's add in some light for this, because we've got flame, but there's nothing surrounding it to give it a glow. So on the torch itself again, if we right click, light, and this time we're going to need point light. So you can already see we have illumination in this general area, and if we bring it just to the edge of the flame itself, and we need to change the color, what we'll do is we'll use the little pipette tool, and let's pick an orange color which is in the flame itself, so about there. So now we can see the illumination from this flame is more accurate. We may need to reduce the range, so let's reduce it to 5. And intensity, let's have that as 2. We'll add shadows, so click on shadow type, and we'll have soft shadows, I think. And we'll keep that as it is. So now what we'll do is let's add some animation to our point light. Actually, I'll right click and rename the flame first. Just call it as torch flame. And I'll call the point light torch illumination. So what we'll do now is we'll create some animation. Let's go to our assets folder down here, And in here, right click, create folder, and we'll call this animations. And in that folder, make sure we have torch illumination, light object selected, and go to animation. Click on create. In fact, actually, if you don't have this animation tab, just click on this little menu button here, click on add tab and click on animation. And it'll bring this up here. So to simply animate this, what we'll do is go on create, and let's call this torch anim 1. So we'll create 3 separate animations here, and then click save. Then click the record button, and we'll notice here samples is set to 60, so we're working with 60 frames per second. First frame is going to be 0, that's going to be our default frame. So what we'll do is hit 0 to overwrite that as such, hit enter, and the okay, how should we do this? I think we'll deal with the intensity. So the intensity by default is 2. So if we hit 0 and then overwrite it with 2 and hit enter, that will set a keyframe as our first frame. So you can see these 2 little dots here. This represents the intensity is changed to 2 because we have it as red. So whatever you have here, retype over and hit enter. This just ensures that the keyframe itself has been set. So let's make 3 animations, each lasting 1 second. So let's go to our 20th frame. So type 20, hit enter, and you'll see this moves along. So at the 20th frame, let's have our intensity of our light decreased to 1. Then hit enter. Then by the 40th frame, hit enter. Let's have our intensity increased to 2.5. So this gives it a bit of a flickering motion. And hit enter. So then by the 60th frame, which is 1 second, so 60, enter, we need to reduce this back down to 2. So hit 2 on intensity again and hit enter. So that's our first animation of a flicker. So then we press the record button once again. That just creates the animation and completes it. So let's create a second animation. All we do here is where you've got the name of your first animation, in this case torch anim 1, click this little box, then click on create new clip. You'll be prompted to save another animation. So torch anim 2 and save. Same again. Let's make sure we're on our first frame, and let's set our first keyframe. So I'll put 0 here. Oops, it does help if we press record first, doesn't it, guys? So earlier versions of Unity, I think before Unity 5.5, the record button was automatically pressed. So anything after, I think 5.5, you would have to hit that record button. So let's set our intensity to 0, then back to 2 and hit enter. And what we'll do on this is let's make this one a slow kind of increase and decrease. So we'll go to frame 30, hit enter. We'll have 2.5, hit enter. And then we'll go to frame 60, hit enter. And we'll go back down to 2, hit enter. And click the record button to complete that animation. So we'll make one more, same process. Torch anim, create new clip, torch anim 3, save, record, frame 0, intensity to 0, then back to 2 and hit enter. And let's go to frame 25, hit enter, and let's have our intensity at 0.5. Let's go to frame 60, hit enter, and let's have it back to 2. So the reason we start and end with 2 is just to add consistency so it doesn't suddenly change its animation and make it look a little bit funny. So it's always best to start and end this kind of animation with the same settings. So let's hit enter and press the record button to complete that animation. So you can take as much time as you need to with this. I'm just getting this over and done with as quick as I can, but without making it look silly, so we can move on. So one thing we need to do now is over here, when we have the torch illumination selected, we need to remove the animator component. So right click on it, remove component. May seem a bit strange, but we need to add something else on here. So we need to add component there. And in this search box, let's type in anim. And we can see we have animation, animator. We've removed the animator, so let's click animation. Change the size to 3 because we have 3 animation clips and hit enter. And now what we'll do is we'll add each one of these animations to the component, and then we need to change them to legacy. So by default, animation, that's going to be torch anim 1, but it's also going to be element 0. So drag and drop into there, torch anim 2, and torch anim 3. You may notice at the bottom it does say it needs to be set as legacy. So let's select the first one, torch anim 1, and in your inspector panel, click the little menu button at the top here, click debug, and then tick legacy. Same applies with the other two, we just need to tick legacy. And then if we head back to normal, change the wrap mode to once on all three. So you just have to make sure you're in the right menu using this little menu button at the top. Okay, that's great. So now should we get into the good stuff? Let's get into some programming. So let's create a folder specifically for our scripts. So back to the asset window, right click, create, folder, and let's call it scripts. So in here, we store all our scripts. Create, C# script. So we'll be doing everything in C# for this because C# is a much more versatile language in Unity and it's much more supported. So let's call this Flame Animations and hit enter on the script, and it will open up in either Visual Studio or MonoDevelop. For this series I'll be using MonoDevelop, but if you have Visual Studio, the script is going to be exactly the same, so don't worry about any differences. So when we open the script up, you'll notice a couple of things. All these at the top, using system collections, generic, and using Unity Engine, the script needs to reference these few things just so as it works and understands what's happening. It's just a way of the script giving itself a bit of inside knowledge of the engine. So everything that we do is going to be inside the public class. And you can see here the public class name is Flame Animations, which is the same as our script name. In JavaScript, it doesn't matter what the file name is, but in C# you have to make sure that the public class name is also the same as the script name itself. Here you can see we have 2 slashes and some grey words. When we have 2 slashes like this, it just brings up a kind of a note. So you can use that to type notes into a script. So that could say anything at all, and the script wouldn't actually run that line of code. So we don't really need that, so we can delete it. Gone. Simple. A void start is a way of showing, or rather the script realizing that when the script runs, it actions whatever is inside these 2 curly brackets. And the same applies for void update. The difference between start and update is that update runs constantly and start just runs once, which is when the script starts. So with this present moment, we don't actually need void start because everything we're doing needs to run constantly. So what we need to do is declare a couple of variables. Now a variable is something that we can reference within the game. So that can be numbers, it can be objects, it can be strings, it can be pretty much anything within the game world. And to define a variable, we need to type the word public int, and in this case int is short for integer, and an integer is going to be the whole number. So we're going to have a mode and animation number. So animation 1, animation 2, animation 3, animation 4, whatever. So however many animations you have will be stored within this integer, and let's call it light mode. So that's how declaring a variable works. Semicolon. Public, what the variable is, and the variable's name, followed by a semicolon. Most lines within code end with a semicolon. It's just a way for the script to recognize this is the end of the line. So now we'll do public, and rather than specify an integer, we'll do a game object. And obviously a game object would be something inside the game world. So game object, and let's call this flame light with a semicolon. So what we're going to do is every frame we're going to check if light mode is equal to 0 because we don't have an animation number 0. If it is 0, then it means that we can run one of the animations. So if, and in brackets, light mode is equal, and that is a double equal. The reason we put double equal is because it could be greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, or not equal to. So it's a couple of different reasons it could be. So we need to put a double equal to 0, close bracket, and then open curly bracket. So we've stated here on this line of code, if something is equal to 0, then we need to perform the following actions. And it's only one single action that we'll do at this point, and that is to start another routine, i.e. we can call it whatever we want. It'll all come together slowly, and if you have problems with this script at all, you can head to the website, download an assets, get it from there, same as any other assets. So we'll put start coroutine, and in brackets we get to call this anything we want at all. So let's call it animate light, and then open close bracket again, semicolon, down a line, and then close curly bracket. Now if you're in MonoDevelop, you'll notice, at least MonoDevelop, it may do it in Visual Studio as well, but it's highlighted red. The reason it's highlighted red here is because the coroutine of animate light doesn't exist yet. So what we need to do is create it. Now we need to go to the point after void update, which is down here. So it'll be between these two last curly brackets. And we need to put, rather than the word void, we need to put IEnumerator. The reason we do this is because we're going to delay the script from running for a second. And you can't do that within void. It can only be done via IEnumerator. And now we put the name of what we call the routine, which was animate light. Then open close bracket, open curly bracket. Let's go down just a couple of lines and then close curly bracket. And we should see that animate light here turns black. So within this coroutine, IEnumerator, what we need to do is we need to randomize the number for light mode. So light mode equals, and we can use something called random.range. Random.range. And in brackets, we need to range it from 1, comma, and the maximum is going to be 4. Even though we have 3 animations, we actually need to put the number 4. The reason we do that is because it's just one of the little quirks of random.range. It will never generate that maximum number, ever. Not quite sure why. It's always been like that for as long as I can remember. And I've been programming in Unity for many, many years. But I don't think there's any real answer. So you always need to put 1 above whatever it is. So semicolon. Next, what we need to do is play the animations. So once we've generated a light mode number, so we've got 1, we need to play animation number 1. And we can do that with an if statement again. So if, in brackets, light mode equals, and once again that's a double equals, 1, close bracket, open curly bracket, then what we need to do is we need to reference the component called animation, which is on torch illumination. So we need to reference this component and play this animation. So everything is going to be named the same, so we shouldn't have a problem. So you just have to make sure that all your naming conventions go into this line of code. So we need flame light dot get component, and then in spiky brackets we define the component name, so it's called animation. So close spiky bracket and then open close bracket dot play with a capital P, and it is important to have a capital P because when programming everything is case sensitive. And then in brackets and quotes, and it should turn orange if you're MonoDevelop at least, and we need to put whatever our animation is. So torch anim 1, torch anim 1, and then quote again, close bracket, semicolon, and then close curly bracket. So that's our complete if statement. So it's saying if it's number 1, it's playing animation number 1. So then we can repeat the same again, and we don't need to retype everything out. We can just copy these 3 lines and paste them again. We just need to make sure that we change the light mode is equal to 2. and we change the torch animation to 2. And once again, we can do number 3. So 3 and torch anim 3. So the final thing we need to do is we need to allow the script to wait for 1 second or just under 1 second so the animation can complete. So to do that, we need to use yield return new. So we're creating a wait function. Wait for seconds, and in brackets we want to wait for just under 1 second, so it's going to be 0.99 with an F. The reason we put an F here is because, unlike our integer, this is called a float. So a float is not a whole number, so we need to put an F afterwards. It's just one of those things that you have to do in C#. So close bracket, semicolon, and the very final thing we need to do after we've run this animation and waited, we need to set light mode back to 0. Light mode equals 0, semicolon, and save the script. So the reason we set it back to 0 is so as in void update we can run the start coroutine animate light once again and generate a different light. So if we head back to Unity now with our script all complete, and hopefully we'll see down here that little spinning thing just checks the script for any problems, and we can see no problems whatsoever. If you did have a problem, it would appear down the bottom here. So what we'll do now is we'll attach this flame anim script to our torch. So drag and drop that script onto torch 1, then click on torch 1, and we can see here we have light mode is 0, flame light non-game object. So we need to drag and drop the actual game object, which is the light, there. Drag and drop. And let's save our scene there. Hold Control, press S, all saved. So now, hopefully, when we press play, we should be able to see the animations playing on here, and we should be able to tell which animation is going to be played by this number here. So let's press play. So you can see here, the illumination and flicker of the light is playing different animations. So it may play the same one again, it may play the same one 3 times in a row, but it's always going to generate at least 1, 2, or 3. So you can see here the effect it's having. And to have a bit more of an insight to that, let's turn off our light source here, which is the point light here. We just need to untick. Let's press play again. And we can see there in the corner, the light is flickering. Now, obviously, it's up to you how you want to work with these animations, but if you have an animation and you want to change it because you think it's not quite right, make sure you have the object selected in the hierarchy, and then go to animation. And then here, select the animation you want to change, and then press the record button, and you can change anything you need to here. So, for example, let's make animation 1 flicker just a little bit more. So if we go to frame 10 here, hit enter, let's have the intensity here bump to 3. Hit enter, and then press the record button to complete that animation. So now that animation is going to be defined as number 1. And hopefully we should be able to see a bit of a difference. We can see a flicker there. So it's all down to you and how you work with these animations. Take your time with it and build up on it. Create as many as you want and use the same principle here on this script. So we'll leave that episode there for now. Next episode, we'll look at a little bit more animation. We'll look at some more coding. We'll look at some UI. And we'll probably look at a door or something to kind of expand this area a little more. So guys, until that next episode, thank you very much for watching.